Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm so glad to see all of our returning viewers here today. If you're new, welcome to our True Crime channel, where we dive deeply into some of the most perplexing and haunting cases you've ever heard. We post new stories every single day, so if you enjoy thoughtful, in-depth true crime documentaries, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us continue sharing important stories like this one. Every day we bring you another real-life case, some resolved, some still lingering with questions, each one examined with care and respect. And, if you find our work helpful, engaging, or even just thought-provoking, please spread the word. Now let's get into today's story. This time, we're returning to North Carolina in the spring of 2019. It was a case that shocked even seasoned detectives and left a quiet community reeling. We'll carefully detail what happened, from the victim's last known steps to the desperate nationwide search that followed. It's a case of a devoted mother and respected nurse whose disappearance would end in unimaginable tragedy. Let's begin our story, starting on a cloudy March morning that would change everything. It is the morning of March 9, 2019. Just after daybreak, the skies over rural Nash County, North Carolina are heavy with thick gray clouds. There's a cool dampness in the air, the scent of moist earth and distant pine drifting across the fields. In the half-light of early morning, the winding two-lane roads that connect family farms and modest homes feel especially empty. The landscape is quiet. Crows perch on fence posts, staring indifferently at the passing of a lone pickup truck. The trees are still, their branches bare and expectant, waiting for spring to fully awaken. It is in this hushed calm that a terrible story is unfolding, largely unnoticed. At this moment, Diana Keel, a warm-hearted mother and dedicated nurse, is nowhere to be found. She has not answered calls. She has not shown up to her shift at Wilson Medical Center. Neighbors, who often see her strolling outside or heading off to work with her bright smile, haven't spotted her since the previous afternoon. Inside the modest home she shared with her husband Lynn, located on a rural property tucked away from the main roads, something seems off. There's a tension in the air. By now, those who know Diana, her friends, colleagues, and especially her young daughter, are feeling an unnamed dread. They can't yet put a finger on it, but something is wrong. Just yesterday, on March 8, 2019, Diana's day was ordinary. She had woken up early, as she always did, while the morning sky was still that pale, watery blue. Diana was 38 years old and worked as a registered nurse at Wilson Medical Center. She was known to be punctual, caring, always attentive to her patients. Her shift began at 7 a.m., and she was never late. That morning, she kissed her daughter goodbye, shared a brief, quiet exchange with her husband Lynn, and drove off on the familiar route to work. Co-workers remember her arriving in the staff parking lot at approximately 6:50 a.m., wearing her usual light blue scrubs, her curly brown hair pinned neatly back. It had been a typical day on the hospital floor. Diana checked vital signs, administered medication, offered soothing words to anxious patients. Around noon, she took her lunch break in the staff cafeteria, chatting casually with a friend about weekend plans. By 3 p.m., she was finishing up her shift's final charting tasks. Another nurse recalls Diana smiling as she talked about taking her daughter to the park the next day. She seemed happy, this co-worker later tells investigators. Just normal Diana. After clocking out around 3:15 p.m., Diana was seen walking to her car. Surveillance footage shows her leaving the hospital's lot at approximately 3:20 p.m. By 4 p.m., a neighbor near her home remembered seeing her car pass by. The neighbor waved, but Diana didn't stop, likely eager to get home and start her weekend. That brief sighting would be the last time anyone outside her family would see her alive. As darkness fell over the rural property that evening, no one could have guessed how drastically things would change. A friend tried texting Diana around 7:30 p.m., inviting her to a Saturday brunch. Diana didn't respond. Another call came through at 9 p.m., went straight to voicemail. This was unusual, but not alarming yet. By the early morning hours of March 9, colleagues had started to worry. Diana was supposed to pick up an extra shift that morning. When she didn't arrive for work and didn't answer her phone, calls went out to her home. Lynn answered, sounding distant, saying Diana must have gone out. He offered no explanation. This response set off quiet alarms in the minds of those who knew Diana's habits. She wasn't the type to vanish without notice, especially not when others were counting on her. By noon on March 9, a close friend decided that something serious might be wrong. She reached out again, and when no answer came, she alerted Diana's family. By late afternoon, Diana's mother, living out of state, was frantic. She said Diana always stayed in touch. She urged neighbors to check the house. When no one could find her, and Lynn's explanations became vague and contradictory, law enforcement was called. Around 5 p.m., a sheriff's deputy arrived at the property. The deputy found Lynn calm but evasive. Inside the home, nothing looked obviously disturbed. No furniture overturned, no visible blood. Yet something about the atmosphere felt charged and off. The deputy asked about Diana's whereabouts. Lynn offered a story. Diana left home the previous day after an argument and hadn't returned. He couldn't say where she went. The deputy noted the tension in his voice, the way his eyes darted. By the following morning, an official missing person report was filed. Soon, search parties began to form. Local media picked up the story. A kind, caring nurse, mother of 2, missing without explanation. The community braced itself as the sheriff's office launched a full-scale search. Diana was born in a small town in Venezuela. She grew up in a tight-knit family that valued education, kindness, and perseverance. Her parents, hard-working and devoted, taught her the importance of empathy and community. Early in life, Diana showed an extraordinary sensitivity to others' needs. She was the kind of child who would comfort another if they scraped their knee, who would help care for younger siblings without being asked. This natural caretaker instinct carried through her adolescence. By her teenage years, her family had moved to the United States, where Diana embraced the opportunities provided by her new home. She learned English quickly, excelling in school. Teachers remember a dedicated student who balanced part-time jobs with her studies, always with an eye toward a better future. By the time she was in her early 20s, Diana had set her heart on a career in healthcare. She attended nursing school, drawn to the idea of working directly with patients, guiding them through fear and uncertainty. Earning her nursing degree required tenacity, but Diana never shied away from hard work. She would stay late at the library, studying anatomy charts and memorizing pharmacology terms, fueled by a desire to help people. After graduation, she took on roles in several medical facilities before settling at Wilson Medical Center in North Carolina. By this time, she was well respected by colleagues and beloved by patients. Her supervisors described her as compassionate yet precise, someone who brought warmth and reassurance into the stressful environment of a hospital ward. Diana's aspirations went beyond just excelling in her current role. She hoped to specialize in cardiac nursing, or perhaps continue her education to become a nurse practitioner. She talked frequently about taking additional courses. There were professional development seminars she had her eye on. When asked about her future goals, she often said she wanted to leave a meaningful mark on every patient's life. She saw herself eventually mentoring younger nurses, guiding them through the challenges of patient care. At the hospital, she was a favorite among staff, often the first person to greet a new nurse, to show them around and help them acclimate. Outside of work, Diana cherished her role as a mother. She had 2 children, a young daughter who lived with her and Lynn, and an older son from a previous relationship who lived elsewhere. She tried to stay connected to her extended family, both in the U.S. and back in Venezuela. Holidays meant large family gatherings if possible, or at least long phone calls filled with laughter and stories. Everyone who knew Diana described her as nurturing, the kind of person who would drop everything to help a relative in need. She made sure her children felt loved, secure, and supported, involving them in community activities and encouraging them academically. The Keel family dynamic, at least from the outside, seemed functional. They lived in a modest home, nothing extravagant but comfortable. Diana was known to be the peacemaker, someone who disliked conflict and preferred to solve problems through calm discussion. With Lynn, observers saw a couple who shared household responsibilities. Diana mentioned that Lynn had a more reserved personality. He didn't socialize as freely as she did. But marriages are complex, and friends sometimes sensed undercurrents they couldn't quite define. Some recalled her looking thoughtful and quiet after an argument with Lynn, but she never confided anything alarming. Extended family remained supportive, and Diana would often spend weekends calling or texting relatives, maintaining a chain of emotional support. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she had mentioned needing to talk to her mother about some personal matters, though no one knew the details. In terms of her interests, Diana loved gardening. She had a small flower bed in the yard and a few herbs growing by the kitchen window. On days off, she liked to visit local shops in Wilson or head out to a nearby park with her daughter. She participated in a local Zumba class, where her friendly spirit earned her a circle of acquaintances who admired her positive energy. On Sunday mornings, she sometimes volunteered at a community health screening program, offering her nursing skills to those in need. Her friends would say that Diana found joy in the everyday, the laughter of her daughter, the satisfaction of a patient's recovery, the quiet beauty of her front yard in springtime. The day Diana vanished, March 8, 2019, began as a typical workday. She rose before sunrise, made her daughter's breakfast, and left the house as Lynn stayed behind. By all accounts, she was in good spirits. She arrived at Wilson Medical Center by 6:50 a.m., greeted colleagues with her usual bright smile, and began her shift. Her performance that day was ordinary and competent. No one noticed any distress in her demeanor. When her shift ended, she left promptly. Another nurse recalls that Diana mentioned she planned to run a quick errand before heading home, perhaps picking up groceries, though that can't be confirmed. There is no evidence of her making any purchases that afternoon, according to receipts and credit card statements later reviewed by investigators. But she did drive home. The neighbor who waved confirmed seeing her car. After that sighting, the timeline grows murky. Phone records show that her cell phone connected to a local cell tower around 5:30 p.m., suggesting she was likely still in the general area, but soon after, her phone went silent. The following morning, March 9, Diana fails to appear at the hospital for an extra shift she'd agreed to. Her colleagues grow worried immediately. This isn't like Diana. She's responsible, dependable. When they call the house, Lynn answers. He says something vague. She might have gone shopping or stepped out. He's not sure. Hours pass and still no word. By the afternoon, concern intensifies. Diana's mother, who lives out of state, starts calling friends and neighbors. When no one can provide an answer and Lynn's tone sounds oddly dismissive, the alarm bells ring louder. By evening, the sheriff's office is notified. It doesn't take long for the authorities to realize that Diana's absence is highly unusual. She's a mother with a stable job, no known reason to flee. Investigators arrive at the Keel home and interview Lynn. He claims they had a minor argument and that Diana left to cool off. Investigators take note. It's possible, but suspicious. The home doesn't show signs of forced entry or a violent struggle, at least not at a glance. Still, something feels staged. The officers begin canvassing the area. Neighbors are asked if they saw Diana leave, on foot or by car. Most say no. A few note that her absence is startling, because Diana was the type to share details of her plans. Search teams form quickly. Local deputies and volunteers start combing through nearby woods, fields, and roadsides. Flyers with Diana's photo are printed. She has warm brown eyes, a gentle smile. Her image is soon broadcast on local TV with the plea, "If you've seen Diana, please contact the authorities." The hospital where she worked issues a statement, calling her a dedicated nurse and a valued team member. As the hours turn into a full day, everyone fears the worst. By March 10, a Sunday, the community is fully mobilized. People who know Diana's kindness and professionalism want her found safe. Family members begin arriving in town, tearful and confused. One says on camera, "Diana wouldn't just run off, she loves her daughter. Please, help us find her." Police set up a command center. They start analyzing cell phone records, credit card activity, and any digital breadcrumbs. As the investigation progresses, law enforcement begins compiling Diana's background. They learn of her Venezuelan roots, her journey through nursing school, her stable career. They speak to coworkers, who confirm that Diana never missed shifts without explanation. A picture emerges of a woman who was grounded, loving, with no history of spontaneous disappearances. Meanwhile, the fields around her home are scoured, drainage ditches are searched, even local ponds are considered. There's an urgency. Every hour that passes without a sign of Diana feels like a step closer to tragedy. On March 12, 2019, 4 days after Diana was last seen, a state trooper is driving along a rural stretch off Polk's Hole Road in Edgecombe County, about 30 miles from Diana's home. It's a remote area, dotted with patches of forest and slow-moving creeks. As the trooper rounds a bend, he notices something partially hidden by underbrush near the roadside. Stopping to investigate, he moves a few branches aside and makes a grim discovery. It's a body, female, matching Diana's general description. The victim is quickly identified as Diana Keel. She has been murdered, and the scene suggests a violent end. Details of her injuries are withheld to protect the integrity of the case and out of respect for the family. Immediately, the investigation turns from a missing person case to a homicide. News of Diana's murder spreads rapidly through the community. At the hospital, co-workers break down in tears. Her mother, who had been holding on to hope, is devastated. The sheriff's office intensifies the investigation, now searching for the killer. Suspicion falls heavily on Lynn. Investigators interview him again, noting inconsistencies in his story. He claims ignorance, suggesting someone else must have harmed Diana. But he offers no plausible suspect, no explanation for why she ended up miles from home, concealed near a rural roadside. As digital forensics experts pore over phone records, surveillance cameras from businesses along possible travel routes, and any bank transactions, the evidence increasingly points to Lynn's involvement. After all, the spouse is often the first suspect in a homicide, especially when the victim is found murdered and there were no previous signs of abduction by a stranger. Within the next 24 hours, detectives discover that Lynn's first wife died under suspicious circumstances years earlier, although it had initially been ruled accidental. This revelation strengthens the detective's resolve to examine his actions more closely. On March 15, a warrant is issued for Lynn's arrest, but when officers arrive to detain him, he's gone. Lynn has fled, turning the tragedy into a nationwide manhunt. The authorities call in every resource at their disposal. He's last known to be driving a pickup truck. Amber Alerts and bulletins are broadcast nationwide. Local North Carolina news stations flash his photo, a heavy-set man with a stoic expression. Detectives review surveillance footage from gas stations, rest stops, and highway toll booths. Tips pour in from the public. Some claim to have seen him at a convenience store in Tennessee. Others say he might be heading toward Arizona. Time ticks by. Diana's family, still reeling from her murder, must now cope with the terror that the suspected killer is on the run. Diana's personal history stands in stark contrast to the horror that has unfolded. She overcame challenges to build a stable life, devoted herself to healing others, and raised her children with love. She had no known enemies, no secret past that would explain her brutal end. Investigators looked closely at the period leading up to her disappearance. They learned that Diana and Lynn's marriage had been troubled. Some friends recall that Diana planned to separate from him, though she hadn't taken formal steps yet. Perhaps there was financial strain. Perhaps disagreements escalated behind closed doors. It's all speculation until concrete evidence emerges. But as they piece together the puzzle, detectives keep circling back to Lynn. The final day Diana was last seen, March 8th, is reconstructed in painstaking detail. In the morning she wakes early to tend to her daughter, preparing a simple breakfast of toast and eggs. She kisses her child's forehead, telling her she'll see her later. She steps outside, feeling the crisp March air, and drives to work. Surveillance cameras place her at Wilson Medical Center precisely at 6:50 a.m. She clocks in, treats her patients, laughs with co-workers. By midday, she eats a quick lunch, salad, and a small piece of fruit, then finishes her duties. At 3:15 p.m., she logs out of the hospital system. On the parking lot camera at 3:20 p.m., she's seen walking briskly to her car, keys in hand, a slight smile on her face. At around 4 p.m., a neighbor sees her pass by on her way home. After that, her digital footprints grow faint. Her phone pings near the house at 5:30 p.m., then goes quiet. Authorities talk to everyone who might have had contact with her that afternoon: neighbors, the cashier at the grocery store she sometimes frequents, but no one recalls seeing her out and about. They review surveillance tapes from local businesses. None show her car passing after 4 p.m. It's as if she vanished upon reaching her driveway. Lynn's statements do not match what investigators know. He says they argued and Diana stormed off. But no one saw her leave on foot or in another vehicle, and her personal belongings, purse, daily essentials, remained inside the house. Suspicion hardens. The crime scene team returns to the home, this time looking more carefully. Inside a closet they find faint traces of blood. Forensic analysis will later confirm it's Diana's. They find other subtle signs of a struggle: misplaced items, scuff marks on the floor. Police interview Diana's co-workers for additional clues. A friend recounts a conversation with Diana a few weeks prior. She said she was tired of fighting, the friend recalls, and she needed a change. But she didn't say more. Another friend mentions that Diana had once planned to move out and get her own place, but hadn't gone through with it yet. Cell phone records show texts between Diana and a close relative a few days before her death, where she expressed frustration about her marriage. These texts, introduced later as evidence, suggest underlying tensions that never fully surfaced publicly. By March 13, the media is in a frenzy. News vans line the rural roads near where Diana's body was found. Journalists report updates on every new scrap of information. The sheriff holds a press conference, stating, "We are pursuing all leads and hope to bring the perpetrator to justice." The public responds with outrage and sorrow. People discuss safety and domestic violence awareness on social media. The hospital staff organizes a small memorial for Diana, leaving flowers and notes at her old locker. More people meet up to celebrate her recovery, but she leaves them both. As the days turn into a week, the manhunt for Lynn intensifies. Eventually, acting on a tip, law enforcement tracks Lynn's vehicle to a location out of state. He is apprehended after a tense standoff on a remote road in Arizona. He's disheveled, visibly agitated, and offers no explanation for his flight. Officers place him in handcuffs. He is returned to North Carolina, where he is charged with the murder of Diana Keel. The community breathes a sigh of relief at his capture, but no one feels triumphant. The loss is too great, the tragedy too profound. With Lynn in custody, investigators proceed methodically. They gather physical evidence, the traces of blood in the closet, fiber evidence from his clothing, and cell phone records that place him near the location where Diana's body was found. Digital forensics from Lynn's devices reveal suspicious internet searches made in the days before Diana's disappearance. Terms related to disposal, hiding evidence, and evading capture. Witness interviews reinforce the timeline that places Lynn as the last person to see Diana alive. The media coverage is extensive. Local news stations show segments of neighbors horrified by the event. Diana's mother, appearing on camera, implores the court to deliver justice. Public sympathy runs high, putting additional pressure on prosecutors to build a solid case. Community members organize support groups for victims of domestic violence. The sheriff's office encourages anyone with relevant information to come forward. Key breakthroughs in the case include the forensics linking the blood found in the house to Diana, DNA analysis tying Lynn to the crime scene, and digital footprints charting Lynn's suspicious activities. Investigators consult experts in forensic pathology, criminal psychology, and digital communications. They reconstruct a chilling narrative after Diana returned home on March 8th. An argument escalated. Perhaps Lynn, fearful of a separation and looming financial or emotional fallout, attacked her. He then transported her body, dumping it in a rural area about half an hour away. After a brief attempt at normalcy, he panicked and fled when the investigation pointed to him. Uncovering Lynn's background reveals a man with a much different public persona than Diana. While details of his youth are not widely known, what emerges is a pattern of controlling behavior and suspicion. Lynn worked various jobs but never achieved the steady respect and admiration that Diana earned naturally. He seems to have few close friends. Investigators find that he was often described as reserved and occasionally moody. Interviews with distant acquaintances yield phrases like "quiet guy" and "kept to himself." It is typical in some domestic homicides for the perpetrator to have had a hidden side, and Lynn's past is combed through by detectives and prosecutors who find hints of jealousy and possessiveness. Psychological profiling experts weigh in. They suggest that Lynn may have felt threatened by Diana's successes, her desire for independence, or her growing dissatisfaction with the marriage. Perhaps he feared abandonment, humiliation, or financial loss. These psychological underpinnings do not excuse the crime, but they help the jury understand motive. A desperate man who took his wife's life to maintain control. After his arrest, Lynn's actions draw even more scrutiny. Investigators track his movements through financial records and phone pings from March 9 to his capture. They find he withdrew cash from an ATM, changed his route multiple times, and tried to turn off his cell phone intermittently. Witnesses recall seeing someone who matched his description buying bottled water and non-perishable food at a convenience store. Surveillance cameras capture his truck at a rest stop. He seems to be on the run but aimless. When confronted, he does not give a coherent account, only mumbles denial or claims ignorance. The legal proceedings against Lynn unfold methodically. He is arrested, booked, and formally charged with first-degree murder. At the initial hearing, he appears before the judge with a court-appointed attorney. He enters a plea of not guilty. The prosecution states they have ample evidence linking him to the crime. The defense tries to suppress certain pieces of evidence, claiming improper collection or chain of custody issues. The judge, after careful consideration, allows the critical evidence to stand. Pretrial hearings shape the trajectory of the case. Media coverage peaks again as the trial date is announced. Reporters line up outside the courthouse, ready to cover every development. Employers go on and on about employees. The trial itself is a solemn affair. The courtroom is tense. Diana's family sits together, clutching tissues, often weeping quietly. The prosecution calls forensics experts, who detail how Diana was killed, when, and the likely sequence of events. Digital analysts show the jury text messages, search histories, and location data that place Lynn at the center of the crime. Witnesses testify about Diana's character, her habits, the improbability that she would simply vanish. A hospital co-worker tearfully recounts Diana's excitement about her future plans. Family members describe the pain of losing someone so loving and kind. The defense attempts to cast doubt. Maybe the evidence is circumstantial, maybe someone else did it, but they fail to provide a convincing alternate suspect or scenario. After both sides present closing arguments, the jury deliberates. The media speculates on the likely outcome, while the community braces itself. When the jury returns with a verdict of first-degree murder, there's a collective exhale. Sentencing follows. The judge pronounces a life sentence without the possibility of parole, giving the cruelty and premeditation of the crime. In impact statements, Diana's family members speak directly to Lynn, describing their heartbreak and the irrevocable loss of a daughter, mother, and sister. "You took away a shining light," her mother says, voice trembling. "We will never understand why." The aftermath is devastating for Diana's children, who must grow up without their mother's love and guidance. Extended family members rally to provide stability, while therapists and counselors become essential. The hospital community sets up a scholarship fund in Diana's name, to support nursing students who share her passion for patient care. Friends establish a charity in her honor, aiming to assist victims of domestic violence and raise awareness about warning signs and available resources. The community's response to Diana's murder is multifaceted. Neighbors come together to support the family, offering meals, childcare, and emotional comfort. Local businesses donate proceeds to the charity established in her memory. Candlelight vigils and memorial services are held. Conversations about domestic violence prevention intensify. Law enforcement and nonprofits partner to improve reporting mechanisms and support networks for those in dangerous home situations. Schools incorporate relationship education into their curricula. Policy discussions arise at the county level, leading to potential reforms in how domestic violence cases are monitored. Earthquakes can be prevented. In the long term, Diana's case leaves a lasting legacy. Her story is included in awareness campaigns, highlighting how victims often appear outwardly successful and happy, yet silently suffer in unhealthy relationships. Legislative discussions consider stricter penalties for domestic violence perpetrators and improved protective measures for potential victims. The community invests in workshops and training for first responders, ensuring they're better equipped to recognize early warning signs of domestic abuse. While nothing can undo the tragedy, Diana's memory endures through acts of kindness, through the patients she once cared for who still remember her gentle touch and reassuring voice. Her children, supported by a network of loved ones, grow up understanding that their mother's life had meaning far beyond its tragic end. Each year, on the anniversary of her death, those who knew Diana gather to light candles, share memories, and recommit to protecting others from similar fates. In reflecting on this case, we see a story that began on a quiet morning with gray skies and ended in a courtroom, with justice served but hearts forever wounded. This tragedy demonstrates that beneath even the calmest surfaces, unimaginable darkness can lurk. It reminds us of the importance of vigilance, communication, and support. For Diana, a nurse who devoted herself to healing others, the community's response ensures her spirit of compassion lives on. We must honor her memory by learning from what happened, by standing together against violence, and by helping those who cannot always help themselves. Thank you so much for watching and for caring about these stories. Diana Keel's murder is a heartbreaking reminder that sometimes danger hides where we least expect it. Please remember to stay vigilant and look out for one another. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. In the comments, let us know if you have thoughts on this case or if you've heard of similar situations in your community. Also, if you want to explore more cases that highlight the importance of domestic violence awareness, check out our related videos. Stay safe, and we'll see you again tomorrow.